New Hampshire and slavery. The legacy of the slave trade in the North is visible throughout the city of Portsmouth, on the streets, and in the historic homes open to visitors. The New Hampshire Black Heritage Trail began here in Portsmouth 30 years ago. This is where folks can take a self-guided walking tour, introducing some of the people and places connected to early African American life.
We didn't have the tobacco fields and the cotton fields like they did in the South. But there was not a place, there was not a job, there was not a location here that wasn't touched by an enslaved person's hand.
Portsmouth has a long tradition of shipbuilding, and ships that left Portsmouth Harbor for West Africa captured Africans and brought them back to New England.
The trade didn't change whether it was in the North or whether it in the South. The scale was different, but we were definitely involved in the shipping, you know, like treating people as cargo, as goods like the rum and the molasses or, you know, anything that we were trading. We were involved in that. Most families who were wealthy families had 2 or 3 enslaved peoples in their house. The Langdon family in Portsmouth had the largest amount of enslaved people in their home and were part of the larger traffickers of enslaved people.
The Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail was established in 1995 thanks to the work of its founder, author, and researcher, Valerie Cunningham.
She has totally changed the face of New Hampshire to include Black history. And that was Valerie Cunningham and her desire to see herself in her town. The first document that she talks about finding was at North Church, and it simply said, "Paid Violet, a slave, $1. And that was the first mention of an enslaved person that she saw in the town.
There are 25 markers throughout Portsmouth and Kittery highlighting areas touched by slavery. Perhaps the most visible marker is this memorial park located on Chestnut Street in downtown Portsmouth. This is the site of an 18th century African burial ground. Nearly 200 enslaved and freed Africans are buried here. Their graves unnoticed and unrecognized until 2003, when construction crews accidentally unearthed them during an excavation.
It wasn't the first time that the burial site had been disturbed. You know, there's lots of reports in the papers, the Portsmouth papers in the 1800s, that said that they took remains out. As you can imagine, you know, they built all these houses over the site.
The remains of 8 people were temporarily removed, and DNA testing revealed this was indeed an old burial ground that had been paved over and forgotten.
But with the returning of the markers, of the monuments, a little bit of the story, we have that connection to our ancestors. We have that story of enslavement. We have some of their stories of perseverance and this retelling of a New England story.
The names of those buried here may not be known, but there were some enslaved Africans whose stories have captivated those who walk this trail. Prince Whipple is one of them. He and his brother were captured and owned by General William Whipple, who lived in the Moffett Ladd House. Ironically, General Whipple was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Prince fought in the American Revolution. He eventually obtained his freedom. Both Prince and his former owner, the General, are buried in Portsmouth's North Cemetery.
Those stories strike a chord because not only the humanness of the story, but the irony, you know, the oddness of our founding fathers not being as pristine as we wanted to believe.
The Heritage Trail offers a number of events during Juneteenth week, including an exhibit by artist Nadroj Nina Holmes of Boston, showcasing digital pictures that he edited of a Southern slave known only as Gordon, and the scars Gordon suffered during his enslavement.
This represents a failure to acknowledge his humanity and what he deserved.
The goal of the Heritage Trail across the state is to connect people to a part of the past that should be recognized every day, not just Juneteenth, because knowing the past opens the door to the future.
The more people, again, you bring into that story, the more of you're moving forward. I think as human beings, we just evolve. Our stories evolve, how we act evolve. The more we know, the more we do, the better at being human we can be.